Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pitts. This is a US political news update where I'm going to give you some analysis on what's going on with the ticking time bomb that is the Jeffrey Epstein files catastrophe, debacle, whatever you want to call it. This is not good for the Trump administration, and he appears to have waged war on his own supporters in what could be a form of political suicide. Now, before we get into the long weeds of this one, it's worth noting, as this has gone under the radar to some degree, that at the same time that all this is happening, and that there's nothing to see here, no such thing as the Epstein client list, etc., we hear that Trump's DOJ, the Department of Justice, just fired Maureen Comey, who prosecuted Ghislaine Maxwell and worked on the federal Jeffrey Epstein case. Is that coincidental? I mean, you're firing the person that knows the most about this. I don't know. It seems highly suspicious that that would happen. Okay, so what's happened in the intervening days since I last talked about this? Well, essentially, Donald Trump has denied there's anything to see here and has started attacking those who believe that there is something to see here, calling this essentially a Democratic hoax. But of course, if it's a Democrat hoax, then, and if they wrote these files and generated the false claims, then surely they would have published them during the Biden administration, but they didn't. So his theory or his claim makes no sense. I think the likelihood is that neither side really wants to publish these because both sides are going to have some people associated with them that are implicated within the files. That's just my speculation. But there is a clamor amongst many Democrats at the moment and some Republicans to publish the files. Okay. The interesting part that kind of whole calculus there, or the calculation, comes in the form of which Republicans want the files to be published, and how is that affecting the support for Trump, and is this going to be the anvil around his neck? Because there are many Republicans, both in Congress, but particularly outside in the wider information spaces, that really want these files to be published. They've been clamoring for this for years. So anyway, this is Trump speaking in the Oval Office.
Mr. President, I know you want to move past all this intrigue over the Epstein files, but I do want to ask you to clarify something you said this morning. You said this was all a hoax. Has your Attorney General told you this was a hoax? What evidence have you seen of that?
No, it's not the Attorney General, no. I know it's a hoax. It's started by Democrats. It's been run by the Democrats for 4 years. You had Christopher Wray and these characters and Comey before him. And it's a bad group. It started, actually, look at the Steele dossier that turned out to be a total hoax. The 51 agents, the intelligence, so-called intelligence agents, it was a hoax.
So notice what he's doing here. He's smashing together a bunch of things and trying to poison the well of the Epstein files thing with Russia, collusion hoax, as the Russia hoax, as he calls it, the Mueller inquiry, Comey, Brennan, all these other things that have a real ideological dimension to them in terms of they are very partisan. He is throwing Epstein in with that. So if you hate the Democrats, then you're going to hate the idea of the Epstein files and wanting them to be published in some manner. This is a kind of a desperate move because actually many of his most ardent MAGA supporters are conspiracy theorists who have been banging on about this for a long time. So for them to suddenly go, oh, it's just a Democrat hoax, would be to throw out their core beliefs about the Epstein files. And this brings into, I guess there is friction here. Not even friction. It's at loggerheads. You have these two ideas, which is Trump is my main man and the Epstein files are one of my main concerns. and these need to be published to blow out of the water all these deep state activists. And now you've got Trump, who is my main man, and I really, really like him, now saying essentially this is a Democrat deep state thing. It's like, this causes a lot of cognitive dissonance for the MAGA supporters.
It's all been a big hoax. It's perpetrated by the Democrats, and some stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans fall into the net.
And here's the political suicide. He is now overtly attacking his base. He's saying, if you believe that the Epstein files have something concrete in them, and if you believe that they should be released to the public, obviously not the dodgy stuff. You don't want to release names of victims and, really sensitive videos and stuff like that. Obviously not that, but the kind of the information in these files. If you want to release them to the public, you are scum, you are stupid, is essentially what he's saying. Now, that is attacking, that's the people who really believe strongly that these files need to be outed are, the stronger the MAGA supporter, the stronger the more fervent the belief is that these files should be outed.
Democrats, and some stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans fall into the net, and so they try and do the Democrats' work. The Democrats are good for nothing other than these hoaxes. They're bad for policy. They're bad for picking candidates that can get elected. Like in New York, we have a communist running. He may get elected too, actually, but he'll destroy the city. It's I call it the Epstein hoax. It takes a lot of time and effort. Instead of talking about the great achievements, we've had a great gentleman yesterday, as you know, went on CNBC and he made the statement that Trump may go down as the greatest president of all in the United States. And instead of talking about the things we've achieved, we've had tremendous achievement. They're wasting their time with a guy who obviously had some very serious problems, who died 3-4 years ago. I'd rather talk about the success we have with the economy, the best we've ever had, and all of the things we've done, including in the Middle East. I mean, you see it. Instead, they want to talk about the Epstein hoax. And the sad part is it's people that are really doing the Democrats' work. They're stupid people. Yeah, go ahead.
So attacking the Republicans who want these files to be outed as stupid people. Now, the question is for many, what does this signify? Why is he so desperate to bury this? So you have a whole spectrum, of course. One is that he's implicated in them, and not even just implicated in them, but implicated in the most serious sense, not just in the files and implicated for being a friend of Jeffrey Epstein, but actually involved in the sexual impropriety and the trafficking, etc., etc. So, and I don't mean to minimize the harm done here. So you've got that. Then you've got implicated in the files in the sense of he's in the files, right? And he flew with Epstein, but often flew with his children, and he claims he didn't go to the island, and so on and so forth. So he just doesn't want the Epstein files to be published because he's in them, and that's just bad PR. Now, we already know he's on a flight logs like 7 times, and etc., etc. We already know he's in them. But I guess, as he's found out from previous court cases, there's a lot of stuff that comes out in a wash here. And it's not necessarily that he's done anything criminal here, but he's just in the files, and that's really bad PR. So that's another reason you might want to bury it. And then it could be that it is linked to intelligence, that there are really big, serious people who are in these files that will be themselves outed, that will cause a national security issue or an international security issue of all these conspiracy theories, or I don't know, or theories, because I think there is some decent evidence, like, when you talk about Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, and his links to Israel. I mean, he's buried in Israel, and all his connections. And if you look at the history and where he came from, and so on and so forth. And then you look at Epstein knowing the former prime minister of Israel, and then there is evidence to suggest that you could have Israeli intelligence connections to this, and we know that the Israelis lobby very hard in Washington and that they have a lot of power, and so there are these theories that it's not just national domestic security issues that could come about as a result of the publishing of these files, but also international. There will be there could be huge international pressure on Trump and on any administration not to publish these files. So that could be a component of the reasoning why he wants to bury them, so on and so forth. So there are all these sorts of reasons that he wants to bury these files. It is definitely a case of methinks he does protest too much, because it's clearly not the case that this is a Democrat hoax. There's absolutely no sound reason that Hillary Clinton and Obama would be writing these files to implicate Bill Clinton. I mean, it just makes no sense, right? So his theorizing, I think, is poor. Here's another example of him. Another example of him speaking by an airplane engine.
President, I know you've urged people to move on, but I'm curious, why do you think your supporters in particular have been so interested in the Epstein story and so upset about how it's been handled? Why
I don't understand it. Why they would be so interested. He's dead for a long time. He was never a big factor in terms of life. I don't understand what the interest or what the fascination is. I really don't. And the credible information's been given. Don't forget, we went through years of the Mueller witch hunt and all of the different things, the Steele dossier, which was all fake. All that information was fake. But I don't understand why the Jeffrey Epstein case would be of interest to anybody. It's pretty boring stuff. It's sordid, but it's boring. And I don't understand why it keeps going. I think really only pretty bad people, including fake news, want to keep something like that going. But credible information, let them give it. Anything that's credible, I would say, let them have it.
So, it's, as someone points out here, the guy standing next to Trump is Howard Lutnick, who was Jeffrey Epstein's neighbor and close associate. Probably means nothing. It turns out that I think he bought the neighboring house to the infamous townhouse where it all happened from the Epstein sort of trust or something. So, Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, could well be implicated in this as well. And he's standing next to Trump and nodding, he's nodding and smiling while Trump is making these claims. Now, Victoria Giuffre, one of the victims, one of the survivors, though sadly not a survivor anymore, recently died, committed suicide, I believe. And she was working at the time with a reporter who was going to be interviewing her, and then she died, and that reporter's been working with her family, and they actually really trust her, and she's had access to Giuffre's diaries, which have been fascinating. So I think we're going to see some more coming out with regard to what her beliefs about what's been going on and what had been going on. We're going to see that, I guess, more and more information emerge. But it's interesting that in the interview with a reporter here for the Times radio channel, she talks about how this scandal did go to the very top of foreign nations.
Yeah, so there was part of it that wasn't the focus of our story, so it kind of almost got buried, and then I revisited it when all this Epstein stuff came back around with the DOJ announcements. In one passage, to read it, she says, "I used to be watched by Epstein's hidden cameras, which I've seen myself. The FBI has the archive footage showing me being abused by other men used as blackmail." And intriguingly, there were other...
So, in other words, she's admitting there is blackmail going on there, and she's one of the victims, right? Was one of the victims. That would go against the idea that there's nothing to see here, that Maxwell and Epstein were just in it on their own, and there isn't a client list, if you like, and it wasn't a big blackmail scheme.
Comments that we actually didn't get into in our reporting, mentioning several high-profile people, including the level of prime minister in another country, that, essentially what I would say is this isn't the end of our reporting.
Okay, but what is clear at this point, to skim over that tease, is...
So the idea is that coming from the diary and one of the victims of the whole sex trafficking scheme, if you like, is this idea that it goes to the very top of a foreign country in terms of people who were involved. Okay, so that then leads one to have some, I guess, there is some extra credibility to the claims that there could be influence from other countries, that this might be an intelligence-linked scandal. Now, Elliot Higgins here from Bellingcat says, if they've nothing to hide, then they're really screwing this up. And he's talking about the whole scandal getting worse and the administration looking more and more either incompetent or trying their hardest to cover something up, by point of fact that Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, released the footage of the cell. Looks something like this, and initially the footage was looked at and then it was found that it was missing a minute, and then Pam Bondi said, well, we've looked into this and apparently it resets every night and you miss a minute. And then it gets even worse because it was found to have been spliced together by initially, the claims from Wired, the technology media outlet, saying it was spliced together. It was using Adobe Premiere Pro. It was because the metadata was still in the video, attached to the video. It was spliced together, and it didn't only just miss 1 minute. They've now had a look at it again, and it looks like it's missing 3 minutes. So, as Colin Rugg here says, the Jeffrey Epstein prison video, that was recently released by the DOJ had almost 3 minutes cut out, not just 1 minute like originally reported. The outlet says the raw video was stitched together in Adobe Premiere Pro from 2 files. Further analysis shows one of the source clips was approximately 2 minutes and 53 seconds longer than the segment included in the final video, indicating the footage appears to have been trimmed before release. Wired reported the file was actually edited and saved several times over a period of more than 3.5 hours on May the 23rd, 2025. Both analyses found that the 2 clips labeled, and it gives you the titles there, were stitched together. The first clip is 4 hours, 19 minutes and 16 seconds long, but only the first 4 hours, 16 minutes and 23.368 seconds appear in the published version, meaning nearly 2 minutes and 53 seconds were cut from the end. According to the metadata, the cut occurs just at 11:58 p.m. and 58 seconds. So that is a big problem for Pam Bondi and the DOJ, who are claiming, there's nothing to see here, we're not covering anything up. As Elliot Higgins then says, if they've nothing to hide, then they're really screwing this up. Just absolutely incredible. So nearly 3 minutes were cut from that video. Now, this means that it appears Pam Bondi has lied about the Epstein call video that the DOJ cell video that the DOJ posted. Just the other day, she confirmed the reports that there was just a single minute missing, and it was due to the day switch. Now, further analysis shows that there are 2 minutes 53 missing from the original video, and this is why she needs to do a lengthy press conference and be truthful with the American people. This won't go away by just letting it slide. Now, the reason I'm reading this particular comment out to you is because this comes from Gunter Eagleman, and Gunter Eagleman is like uber right-wing influencer on Twitter, right, on X, super right-wing, and this is your Mr. MAGA. And if Mr. MAGA here is calling for Pam Bondi to come out and give a press conference, a lengthy press conference to discuss this because she's lied, you are starting to see a major fracture within the base of the GOP. Now, we're going to return to that idea after we look at this. So there was another vote not just one that took place in a rules committee. Remember the other day, all the Republicans, bar one, voted against the files being published, and it's looking very partisan. Then there was this, but we need to be a little bit careful about this. So
on this vote, the yeas are 211, the nays are 210. The previous question is ordered. The question is on adoption of the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. Okay,
so what we have here is a vote that included the publishing, or I think there was an amendment, a Rocana amendment. Again, he seemed to be very involved in trying to get these out, the Democratic representative. This went to a vote where every single Republican voted against publishing the files, 211, and then 210 Democrats voted for. I say every single one, as in none voted nay for the Republicans. There were 9 who didn't vote, and with the Democrats there were 2 who didn't vote, and that meant the Republicans won, and they might not have been there, to be honest. It might not be anything insidious that they didn't vote, but anyway, that meant a win by 1 for the Republicans for not publishing it. So loads of people have gone crazy about this. A total of 211 Republicans just voted to block the release of the Epstein files. A total of 210 Democrats voted to release the Epstein files. One party wants full transparency and the other wants to continue hiding evidence of paedophiles. I voted for the side that doesn't want the hiding of evidence of paedophilia. How about you guys, says Brian Krasenstein there. Now, it is worth noting that this was quite a complex thing called the previous question. In fact, we're going to go to, of all people, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who gives an excuse as to why the vote went like it did in the House of Representatives.
I got to correct something real quick.
Please.
So it's being reported that House Republicans unanimously voted to block the release of the Epstein files, and I want to straighten out the record right now. That is not true. If I could vote, okay. If I could vote to release the Epstein files, guys, you would have my vote. I would vote yes.
So she just voted against it. So where's this going?
Here's what just happened. It was a procedural vote, and we have these all the time. It's called a PQ. It's voting on the previous question. And if the Democrats had won the previous question, which I know sounds insane, it's one of these crazy rules in the House that are hard to understand, that means they would control the House floor. And that means they could bring up anything. They could bring up impeachment articles against President Trump. They could bring up a whole package of insane Democrat agenda items and force votes on the House floor on these things. That's what we voted against. We never allowed Democrats to have control of the House floor because we control the House floor.
Yes.
So it's a misunderstanding, and I just wanted to straighten that out.
And there is a little bit to this. So this was, I think, the last time a previous question was voted by the way the minority party was in 1988. I might be wrong there. It gets a little bit complicated, but there is a kind of partisan procedural thing to that. So it's not just as easy as saying the Republicans simply voted unanimously against the publishing of the Epstein files. And so this is talked about in The Hill a little bit. Republicans torpedoed Democratic effort to force a vote on releasing the Epstein files. So the latest attempt by the House Democrats to force a vote on releasing files related to the disgraced late financier Jeffrey Epstein failed on Tuesday. Democrats unsuccessfully urged the chamber to oppose a routine procedural vote known as a motion of ordering the previous question, since failure would have triggered a vote on Representative Rocana's amendment requiring Attorney General Pam Bondi to preserve, compile, and publish the Epstein files. The Epstein files have been a source of controversy, etc., etc. So the vote on a motion ordering the previous question is almost always a routine party line vote, with members of the majority party voting in favour of and those in the minority party voting in opposition. It represents a last chance effort for members in the minority to try and force consideration of certain legislation. Now, the thing is that many Republicans, as you heard from Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think would be okay with those files being released, because actually they're quite big on that, such as Marjorie Taylor Greene. In the end, Republicans united and supported the procedural vote, bringing the final tally to 211 to 210 along party lines, clearing the majority threshold that Democrats were hoping to avoid. Democrats have framed the procedural vote as a referendum on whether Republicans want the Epstein files to be released or whether they would fall in line with Trump's request. Quote, Republicans spent years screaming at the Epstein files to be released. Now Donald Trump wants to hide them. Today, every Republican can vote to release the files. Will they give the American people transparency or block the truth to protect Trump? Representative Dan Goldman, a Democrat from New York, said on Twitter, and so on and so forth. So I think it looks bad for the Republicans, definitely, but there is an element of it being a kind of partly procedural, partly partisan sort of thing. Or very much a partisan thing. Now, then, I presume after that, we are seeing a bipartisan separate bill. So I think that the what they were voting on was Ro Khanna's amendment to another bill that would publish, or that would seek to preserve the Epstein files and then make sure that Pam Bondi publishes them. But it wasn't like a standalone bill on its own. I think it was an amendment to another bill, which then also complicates matters in terms of that procedural vote. So, but I could be wrong here. I'm no massive expert here. So, Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie, who voted against the Medicaid bill, remember recently, was persona non grata in the Republicans. He said, Thomas Massie and I are introducing the Epstein Files Transparency Act, so a separate act on its own, a bipartisan bill, to require the Attorney General to release the files within 30 days. Representative Massie is working on the rule to ensure there is a vote. The public deserves to know where every member stands. So, you know, it might not get through Rules Committee, it might not get voted on, because, you know, each side can go through whatever shenanigans they can in order to not get this put to Congress. But here it looks like there is an appetite from some Republicans, at least, to try and get something voted on. So Congress just introduced the Epstein Files Transparency Act, and it's massive. The bill demands the DOJ release everything: flight logs, names of officials, internal FBI emails, immunity deals, Epstein death records. No redactions for reputational harm or political sensitivity. If passed, this would blow the lid off it all, says this person. 6 Republicans have now signed on to the bipartisan Epstein Files Transparency Act by Democrat Ro Khanna and Republican Thomas Massie, which would pass the House if all Democrats vote in favor as expected. Speaker Johnson bring it to the floor. And the 6 that signed are Thomas Massie, Lauren Boebert, Jeff Van Drew, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Eric Burleson, Tim Burchett. So Tim Burchett, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, super MAGA people. But yeah, and this isn't a case of publishing all the sordid details and exposing all the victims and whatnot. No, this is just a sensible publishing of the files and who might well be involved. Now, let's go back to Elliot Higgins. Elliot Higgins from Bellingcat, and I've interviewed him and he's talked about this model. Go and check out my interview with Elliot Higgins where we discussed this. And he talks about how does disinformation spread and who is acting on essentially true believers to manipulate them. So the idea is you have true believers. So take, for example, a MAGA Republican. It doesn't even have to be MAGA Republican, but let's use that as an example. You've got a MAGA Republican who truly believes that the Epstein files contain X, Y, and Z, and they need to be published, and etc., etc. These are true believers. They get manipulated by official state political and government actors, proxy state political and government actors, and self-interested actors. So things like influencers like Benny Johnson, we just heard interview Marjorie Taylor Greene. He is a self-interested actor who's making money out of grifting, and he might sell himself as a true believer, But then actually, so what you're starting to see is true believers switching back to actually their core position of self-interested actor. And we're going to see that in a second. It's really, really super important you understand this. So you've got the state actors working, you've got international state actors and proxies. So when you talk about Russian disinformation, this is much clearer because you've got obviously, Russia and its state activities. Then you've got these proxies abroad that are kind of fronts for the FSB or the Russian state. They're acting and doing things and pretending to be you got Russia Today, and you get people on Russia Today. Jackson Hinkle, right? Is Jackson Hinkle a true believer? Does he truly believe this stuff, or is he a self-interested actor who's working with RT, which is underwritten by the state, to influence true believers? And these true believers are, I believe that the Russians are killing Nazis in Ukraine. I'm all for Russia, blah, blah, blah. These are like people that are desperately wrong, have been disinformed. And they've been disinformed by all of these people acting on them. Jackson Hinkle, you might think is a true believer, but is more likely to be a self-interested actor who gets financial kickbacks for saying the disinformative things that he says, that then influence true believers. Okay, so understand that model for them when we look at how different people are reacting to the Epstein files shenanigans. So first, we're going to go to US House Speaker Mike Johnson. So we've just seen a bipartisan bill act going to be put to Congress potentially from Ro Khanna, Thomas Massie and others. And you think, right, it needs to go through the speaker so that he puts it, to I'd say he tables it, but actually it means something different in the US that. So the US House Speaker Mike Johnson calls for the release of Epstein files amid a backlash. This is very important. So you've got Mike Johnson, who is super loyal to Trump, actually saying something that is a position against Trump's. This is very, very important. So Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, called for the Justice Department to make public documents related to the disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein breaking with Donald Trump over an issue that has roiled the president's right-wing base. It was a rare moment of friction between Trump and the Speaker, top ally on Capitol Hill, and came as the president faces growing backlash from conservatives who have expected him to make public everything known about Epstein, who killed himself in 2019 while in federal custody as he faced sex trafficking charges. Of course, that claim is disputed by many in this kind of information space, that he killed himself. Last week, the Justice Department announced that his death was a suicide, and that despite conspiracy theories to the contrary, there was no list of clients to be made public, nor would there be further disclosures about the case. Conservative allies of the president have since criticised him and the Attorney General Pam Bondi for what they see as opaque handling of a case that Trump campaigned on getting to the bottom of. Quote, it's a very delicate subject, but we should put everything out there and let the people decide it, said Mike Johnson to Benny Johnson, a right-wing podcaster, in an interview released on Tuesday. Quote, I agree with the sentiment that we need to put it out there. Referring to a comment made to Fox News this year that Epstein's client list was sitting on my desk right now to review, which is what Pam Bondi said, Johnson said she needs to come forward and explain that to everybody. We need the DOJ focusing on the major priorities, so let's get this thing resolved. Now, that earlier in the day, Republicans voted down an attempt by Democrats to insert language into legislation that would require files related to the Epstein case to be made public. So that was that procedural thing that was voted down, but it was an amendment to another kind of piece of legislation. Right, okay, so you've got Mike Johnson now calling for this to be resolved against what Trump is saying. Now, remember, Trump has come out, we heard him on those interviews or at the press gaggles talking about how this was a hoax. He's actually said this very clearly on True Social as well. Trump calls the Epstein scandal BS and says he no longer wants to support he no longer wants the support of weaklings who care about it. So he's calling his own supporters weaklings who might be interested in the Epstein files being published. Trump is drawing a line away from the woke right, who has already turned on him and will only be his base extortatively. So Tim Pool, so I'm going to come back to James Lindsay in a second, who just said that. Tim Pool, who is one of these right-wing influencers, says of Trump's Truth Social, we're just about to read, Trump is trying to nuke his base. This is your fracture, right? So Tim Pool has now come out against Trump's statement, saying he's trying to nuke his base. James Lindsay here, like, I published a book by James Lindsay. I've interviewed him twice. He's now this anti-woke campaign. I interviewed him like 10 years ago when he was sensible. Now he's just batshit crazy and just a full-on anti-woke, obsessive, right? But you can see this tension here between the Republican base now. It's amazing to think James Lindsay is now firmly in the middle of that Republican base. I remember a time when things were different. So Donald Trump said the radical left Democrats have hit pay dirt again, just like with the fake and fully discredited Steele dossier, the lying 51 intelligence agents, laptop from hell, which them swore had come from Russia. No, it came from Hunter Biden's bathroom. And even the Russia scam itself, a totally fake and made up story used in order to hide crooked Hillary Clinton's big loss in the 2016 presidential election. These scams and hoaxes are all the Democrats are good at. It's all they have. They are no good at governing, no good at policy, and no good at picking winning candidates. That's broadly what he said in the Oval Office there, but that is one long sentence, by the way. And it is basically throwing the Epstein files scandal in with all of these so-called Democrat hoaxes. That's his attempt. Poison the well, dismiss this as a Democrat hoax. Will that be enough to assuage the worries and desires of many of his most fervent followers? Also, he says, unlike Republicans, they stick together like glue. Their new scam is what we will forever call the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. So now he's trying to label it like he does with individuals. He gives them nicknames like he does the Russia hoax, like he does with the laptop from hell. All of these have a label, a name. This is now the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. And my past supporters have bought into this bullshit, hook, line, and sinker. So he's really going to town on his supporters here. They haven't learned their lesson and probably never will. Even after being conned by the lunatic left for 8 long years, I have more success in 6 months than perhaps any president in our country's history. And all these people want to talk about with strong prodding by the fake news and the success-starved Dems is the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. Let these weaklings continue forward and do the Democrats' work. Don't even think about talking of our incredible and unprecedented success because I don't want their support anymore. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Make America great again. I don't want their support anymore. He is cutting these people off. You are starting to see, and I don't have them all listed here, but there are a whole host of people who have said, I can't believe he's saying this. I'm out now. He is losing supporters over this. Actually, also reflected, by the way, in his polling at the moment, which is bad. So, Elon Musk is now starting to be heard again. Wow, amazing that Epstein scare quotes, killed himself, and Ghislaine is in federal prison for a hoax. Elon Musk saying actually a pretty sensible thing there, that this makes no sense being a hoax because people have gone to prison precisely because it's not a hoax. Maxwell killed himself, one would think, because this was very real, and so on and so forth. You've got people like Nancy Mace, who's highly controversial, anti-trans representative, who is very famous in these kind of circles now. All child rapists should get the death penalty. And readers added context. In other words, this was community noted by saying Nancy Mace wrote this minutes after voting against the release of the Epstein files. So this is forcing people to go one way or the other. Now we've got, goodness me, Alex Jones from InfoWars infamy saying this.
You talk about this, I'm going to excommunicate you. Well, you're not the Pope, bro. You're not speaking from the throne ex cathedra. And plus, I'm not Catholic. So, I think of Catholics, it's just, give me a break. Anyone who disagrees with anything I say is banished. And I'm not saying Trump land is a cult. the Democrats are the cult of hating reason and logic and common sense. But when Trump starts behaving like that, it starts getting into cult territory. And I bet, since I talked in the first hour and said I'm not in this cult, if that's what it's turning into, I bet there's already news articles about it.
I love this. I'm not saying that Trump world is a cult. Democrats are, that's a cult. That's a cult. I'm not saying this is a cult, but it's a cult. But Democrats are a cult.
But I went on to say Trump is not a cult yet, but behavior like this starts going down that road. But I guarantee if it's not out now, it'll be out in the next hour. And it'll be Jones says he's left the Trump cult. Nope, never was in the cult. Not saying it's a cult, but this is starting to become cult-like language. What you talk?
Anyway, on another video, he says, I feel physically sick about all this Jeffrey Epstein thing. Like, he desperately wants it to be published. So he's one. I mean, he's a massively important barometer, I think, of what's going on. And if you've lost Alex Jones, then you're going to be losing a lot of, well, certainly batshit crazy MAGA types, but you're going to be losing some of your base. Now, Tim Pool, fascinating. So Tim Pool said, this is what he said before he commented on Trump's Truth Social post, where he said Trump is trying to nuke his base. But actually previously he'd said this. So Pam Bondi just said the Epstein list is on her desk, released the list and exposed the criminals, said Tim Pool back on February 21st. So he's long been saying we need to publish the Epstein files. Then there was I think a memo that went around to all the influencers a couple of days ago when this was blowing up big time. And the White House, probably Susie Wiles and the aides around Trump, were in damage limitation mode. And they're like, we need to get the right-wing influencers back on side. So you had Benny Johnson coming out and saying, I think the words were something like, I trust the people in the White House now to deal with this. We need to stop talking about this. And then you had Tim Pool coming out and saying, it's absolutely insane that Democrats actually voted to have the US government publish child porn. WTF is even going on anymore. In other words, when you had these two votes, a Rules Committee vote and that procedural vote, where the Democrats were voting for the publishing of the files, which is exactly what Tim Pool had previously asked for. But now, because he has to take sides with Donald Trump, he's coming out and having to rationalize why the Democrats are wanting the files to be published, which he also previously wanted, and the Republicans are voting against it. So the rationale he's now using is, oh my goodness, the Democrats want to publish child pornography. Like, that's what they want to do by releasing these files, even though very clearly in both the Act and the amendments, that was not what was going to be taking place. So he was community noted. The Roe-Candace Amendment does not compel the government to publish child pornography. This is a misreading of legislation. The sponsor himself noted that the Department of Justice would, of course, protect victims' identities, etc., etc. So Pekka Kablianemi says, Timmy, the Russian asset, changed his mind really quickly. But he's flip-flopping all over the shop because they don't quite know what to do, the base, because they really want the Epstein files scandal to be resolved. And yet they also really want to support Donald Trump. And it is playing with their heads. And some of them, like Alex Jones, are actually being faithful to the ideology about Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, if you're a real out-and-out conspiracy theorist, which clearly Alex Jones is. I mean, look at Sandy Hook. He was taken to court and lost the court case because he said Sandy Hook, where you had a mass shooting killing elementary school kids. He said they were crisis actors and it was false flag, blah blah blah. And you had all the parents of people who had lost, the parents of kids who have been killed, going, "What are you talking about? Like, I've just lost my kid." So they took him to court and they won. He is a deep, out and out conspiracy theorist, and so that core conspiracy theory ideology is trumping his support for Trump, right? So some people are going to be bleeding away from the Republican base. About Tim Pool, it seems that breaking news about Trump personally calling some of his influencers to change the Epstein rhetoric was true. Tim and Gunter Eagleman, we've already mentioned, are doing lots of gymnastics to brainwash the cult. And we've seen this, as I mentioned, from Benny Johnson and others. So Tim Pool says, absolutely insane that Democrats actually voted to have the US government publish child porn. What the F is even going on anymore? Barefoot pregnant, no excuse for pushing to release evidence that would traumatize victims all over again. So they go from, these files need to be released, 3 years of these files need to be released. And then when they aren't released because Trump says they don't exist, and when the Democrats want them to be released, then they go, no, we shouldn't be releasing them because it would traumatize the victims. Gunter Eagleman says, Democrats are the party of paedophilia. Of course they want to see that shit. So, but then we've had Gunter Eagleman also come out against this. So, you know, you are seeing the schizophrenia from these people because they don't know how to deal with this. They're like, I really want this, but I really like Trump. So it's like, I've been convinced to support Trump and say that this is ridiculous. And then at other times I'm like, no, this is definitely what I want. And Trump's doing the wrong thing. And so you're just getting this massive fracture in the support base. Absolutely fascinating to watch from a kind of psychological point of view, from a philosophical point of view, in like how psychology actually trumps philosophy, or, you know, our rationality goes out the window in light of kind of ideological commitments or cultic personality commitments. And that's what's going on here. This is, honestly, it's the anvil around Trump's neck, and you know it because he is protesting way too much. This is really destroying the credibility of the Trump administration, if it ever had any. And it's doing a damn good job of making him less popular and peeling away some of his core base here. Much more on this to come, no doubt, but I just thought I'd give you the update today. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.